my son yelled, "Pay rent or get out." On Christmas, what I said next left him absolutely speechless. The Christmas tree lights blurred through my tears as my son's words echoed through the living room I had decorated just hours before. "Pay rent or get out, Mom. I'm done with this arrangement." I'm Margaret, 56 years old, and I never imagined spending Christmas morning being evicted by my own child. But let me back up, because this story doesn't start on Christmas Day. It starts 3 years earlier, when I made a decision that would change everything. The beginning of the end. 3 years ago, my husband Richard passed away suddenly from a heart attack. We'd been married for 32 years. The grief was crushing, but the financial reality was even harder. Richard had always handled our finances, and I discovered we had significant debt I knew nothing about. The house, our beautiful 4-bedroom home where we'd raised our son Daniel, had a reverse mortgage I didn't even know existed. Within 6 months, I lost everything. The house, most of our savings, even Richard's life insurance went to paying off debts. At 53, I found myself essentially homeless, with nothing but 2 suitcases and a broken heart. Daniel was my only child. He was 28 then, recently married to Jennifer, a corporate lawyer who made more in a month than I'd made in a year as a part-time librarian. They had just bought a large house in the suburbs, 4 bedrooms, finished basement, the works. When Daniel offered to let me move into their guest room temporarily, I cried with relief. "It's just until you get back on your feet, Mom," he'd said, hugging me tight. We're family. The uncomfortable truth. The first year wasn't terrible. I kept to myself, tried to be invisible. I cooked dinners, cleaned the house without being asked, did their laundry. I was desperate to earn my keep, to prove I wasn't a burden. I found a job at a local bookstore, but at my age and with limited recent work experience, I was making barely above minimum wage. Jennifer was polite, but distant. I could feel her watching me, measuring how much space I took up in her home. Daniel started coming home later, spending more time at the office. Sunday dinners, once warm and full of laughter, became tense affairs where we all pretended everything was fine. By year 2, the cracks were showing. Jennifer started making comments. "Must be nice to have no bills," she'd say with a tight smile. Or, "I wish I could just work part-time at a bookstore and call it a day." I increased my hours, picked up weekend shifts, started paying for all my own food, toiletries, everything. I ate in my room so I wouldn't be in their way, but it was never enough. The truth was, I wasn't just living in their house. I was a reminder of everything they didn't want to become: vulnerable, dependent, old. The tension builds. This past year was brutal. Daniel had changed. The sweet, compassionate boy who used to bring me flowers on Mother's Day had transformed into someone I barely recognized. He talked constantly about building wealth and protecting assets. Jennifer had convinced him they needed to maximize their income potential, and apparently having a rent-free tenant wasn't part of that plan. In October, Daniel approached me with a formal rental agreement. "It's time we put this on a business footing, Mom," he said, unable to meet my eyes. "You'll need to pay $200 a month starting in November." I felt like I'd been slapped. $1,200 was nearly my entire paycheck. "Daniel, honey, I can't afford that. You know how much I make." "Then you need to find a better job," he interrupted, "or find roommates. Jennifer and I have been more than generous, but we have our own financial goals." Our relationship had been reduced to a line item on a spreadsheet. I paid November's rent. I paid December's rent. Both times I had to skip meals to make it work. I lost 12 pounds in 2 months, but I paid because the alternative, being homeless at 56, was too terrifying to contemplate. Christmas morning. Which brings us to Christmas morning. I'd been awake since 5 a.m. preparing a holiday breakfast. Cinnamon rolls from scratch using Richard's mother's recipe. Fresh coffee. I'd spent my last $40 on small gifts for Daniel and Jennifer. Thoughtful things, carefully chosen, a leather bookmark for Daniel, who loved to read, a silk scarf for Jennifer in her favorite color. They came downstairs at 9 a.m. Jennifer was on her phone. Daniel barely looked at me. "Merry Christmas," I said softly, gesturing to the breakfast spread. "We're doing brunch at Jennifer's parents' at 11, Daniel said flatly. "We're not really hungry." I felt the rejection like a physical blow, but I swallowed it down. "That's okay, I'll wrap these up. Oh, and I have gifts." "Before we do gifts," Daniel interrupted, "we need to talk about January's rent." My heart sank. "I'll have it. I always." "It's increasing to $1,500, Jennifer cut in. "Property taxes went up. We need to adjust." $1,500. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. "I can't," I whispered. "I'm already barely surviving on—" "Then maybe you need to make other arrangements," Daniel said, his voice cold. His voice, my son's voice, was cold. Something inside me cracked. Maybe it was the Christmas tree I decorated alone. Maybe it was the cinnamon rolls nobody would eat. Maybe it was 3 years of making myself smaller and smaller and still not being small enough. "Other arrangements?" I repeated quietly. "Pay rent or get out, Mom." Daniel's words were sharp, final. "I'm done with this arrangement." The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer looked almost triumphant. Daniel looked away, unable or unwilling to face what he'd just said. The response that changed. Everything. I set down the spatula I'd been holding. My hands were shaking, but my voice came out steady, calm, clear. "All right, Daniel, let me tell you about arrangements." He looked surprised that I was speaking at all. "When you were 7, I continued, you had pneumonia. Do you remember? You were in the hospital for 8 days. Your father and I didn't have insurance that covered the full cost. The bill was $47,000. I took a second job cleaning offices at night for 2 years to pay it off. I slept 4 hours a night so you could have the medical care you needed." Daniel's face paled slightly, but I wasn't done. "When you were 16 and wrecked your father's car because you were texting while driving, do you remember that? The insurance refused to cover it because of your negligence. Your father wanted to make you pay for it yourself, teach you responsibility. But I saw how devastated you were, how scared. I convinced him to use the money we'd been saving for our anniversary trip to Hawaii. We never took that trip. I worked overtime at the library instead." "Mom," Daniel started, but I held up my hand. "When you decided you wanted to go to Northwestern instead of the state school where you had a full scholarship, do you know how we paid for it? We took out a second mortgage on our house, that house I lost after your father died. We would have owned it outright if we hadn't borrowed against it to pay for your dream school. That was $180,000 in loans, Daniel. Your father worked himself into an early grave trying to pay it down." Jennifer was staring at me now, her phone forgotten. "And when you proposed to Jennifer, you asked me to help pay for the ring because you'd overspent on your condo. Do you remember how much I gave you?" I looked directly at my son. $6,000. That was the life insurance money from my mother's death, the only inheritance I ever received. I gave it to you without hesitation because I loved you and wanted you to be happy." The truth unveiled. My voice was still calm, but tears were streaming down my face now. "So yes, Daniel, let's talk about arrangements. Let's talk about the arrangement where parents sacrifice everything for their children, not because they expect repayment, but because that's what love is. Let's talk about the arrangement where a mother gives and gives and gives until there's nothing left, and then gets told to pay rent or get out on Christmas morning." Daniel's face had gone from pale to red. He looked like he might be sick. "I have been paying rent," I continued. "I've been paying it my entire adult life. I paid it in sleepless nights and missed opportunities and deferred dreams. I paid it in watching your father work himself to death, trying to give you everything. And the only thing I ever asked for in return was a place to exist while I figured out how to rebuild my life after losing everything. I walked over to the coffee table where I'd placed their gifts. I picked up the small wrapped boxes. "I spent my last $40 on these," I said softly. "I've been eating rice and beans for 2 weeks so I could buy you Christmas presents. Because even after everything, even after being made to feel like an unwanted tenant in my own son's home, I still love you. That's the arrangement, Daniel. That's always been the arrangement." I set the gifts down and walked toward the stairs to pack my things. The aftermath. "Wait," Daniel's voice cracked. "Mom, wait, please." I turned around. My son was crying, actually crying, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry," he choked out. "Oh God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. When did I become this person?" Jennifer was staring at her hands, her face flushed with what I hoped was shame. Daniel crossed the room and wrapped his arms around me. He was sobbing now, his whole body shaking. "Please don't leave. Please, I've been so horrible to you. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please don't go." I stood there for a long moment, feeling my son's tears soaking into my shoulder, and I had a choice to make. I could hold on to the anger, the hurt, the betrayal. I could walk out that door and let him live with the consequences of his cruelty. Part of me wanted to, but he was still my son. And maybe that's the real arrangement, the one that goes beyond money and fairness and keeping score. The arrangement that says love persists even when it's tested, even when it's taken for granted, even when it seems foolish to keep giving it. The conversation. We sat down, all 3 of us, and had the most honest conversation we'd had in 3 years. Daniel confessed that Jennifer's family had been pressuring them about having a dependent living in their home, that his coworkers made jokes about being unable to get rid of his mother, that he'd been so consumed with appearing successful that he'd forgotten what actually mattered. Jennifer, to her credit, was quiet for most of it. But eventually she spoke. "I'm sorry too," she said, and she actually sounded like she meant it. "My parents raised me to believe that asking for help is weakness, that family should be completely self-sufficient. But watching you this morning," she trailed off, "my mother would have called me ungrateful, told me I owed my parents nothing. But that's not who I want to be." The new arrangement. We didn't solve everything that day. You don't undo 3 years of hurt in one conversation. But we started. Daniel insisted I stop paying rent entirely. I refused, not out of pride, but because I needed to maintain some independence, some dignity. We compromised. I pay $300 a month, and in return, I help with cooking and shopping, but only because I want to, not because I have to earn my keep. More importantly, we started talking, really talking, about money, expectations, feelings, resentments, about the ways we'd all failed each other and the ways we wanted to do better. Jennifer suggested family therapy. I almost laughed. My daughter-in-law suggesting therapy felt like something from an alternate universe. But we went. We're still going. It's awkward and sometimes painful, but it's helping. Looking forward. It's been 6 months since that Christmas morning. Things aren't perfect. Jennifer still sometimes makes thoughtless comments. I still sometimes feel like I'm walking on eggshells. Daniel still works too much and stresses about money. But there are good moments too. Last month, Daniel took a day off work just to spend time with me. We went to an art museum, got lunch at our old favorite diner, talked for hours like we used to when he was young. He told me he's been seeing a therapist individually, working through his fear of financial instability, trying to understand when ambition turned into callousness. Jennifer has started joining me for coffee on Saturday mornings. She opened up about her own mother, a cold woman who measured love in terms of achievement and viewed vulnerability as failure. She's trying to unlearn those lessons, she said. We're both trying. The bigger picture. I've thought a lot about that Christmas morning over the past months, about what it means to be family, to be dependent, to be older in a society that worships youth and independence, about how easily we can become strangers to the people we love when we stop seeing them as fully human. Here's what I've learned. Dignity doesn't come from being self-sufficient. It comes from being treated with respect, regardless of your circumstances. And real strength isn't about never needing help. It's about being brave enough to ask for it and humble enough to give it without keeping score. I've also learned that people can change. Not overnight, not perfectly, but genuinely. Daniel isn't the same person who told me to pay rent or get out. He's working on himself, facing his flaws, trying to be better. That takes courage. As for me, I'm working on rebuilding my own life, not just surviving in the margins of someone else's. I got promoted at the bookstore. I'm taking a community college class in web design. I'm making friends, pursuing hobbies, remembering who I was before I became invisible. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe I'll eventually get my own place. Maybe I'll stay here. But now it's actually a choice, not a desperate necessity, and that makes all the difference. Final thoughts. If you'd told me 6 months ago that the worst Christmas of my life would lead to the healing of my relationship with my son, I wouldn't have believed you. But sometimes we have to break completely before we can rebuild into something stronger. To anyone else out there feeling invisible in their own family, feeling like a burden, feeling like their needs don't matter, I see you. Your worth isn't determined by your paycheck or your productivity. You deserve dignity, respect, and love, not because you've earned it through sacrifice, but because you're human. And to anyone who's pushing away someone they love because they're scared or stressed or too focused on getting ahead, stop. Just stop. Look at the person in front of you. Really see them. Before you say something you can't take back, before that person you've taken for granted disappears from your life, either physically or emotionally. Because in the end, the only arrangement that really matters is the one where we choose every single day to treat each other with kindness. To remember that being family isn't about transactions, it's about showing up, especially when it's hard. That Christmas morning, standing in the kitchen with tears streaming down my face, I didn't know if I had the strength to forgive my son, but I'm grateful I found it. Not because he deserved it, but because I did. I deserved to be free of the anger. I deserved to reclaim my relationship with my child. I deserved a second chance at having a family that actually felt like family. We're not there yet, but we're trying. And sometimes, trying is enough. Merry Christmas. I hope yours is filled with more love and less ledgers, more connection and less calculation. And if it's not, if you're hurting today, know that tomorrow can be different. Sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough to tell the truth.